My name is Helena Whitmore, and I'm 46 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that if I stayed steady, if I worked hard, showed up, carried the weight, no one else noticed, my family would feel that solidity, maybe even appreciate it. I never needed grand gestures or showy affection. Quiet stability always felt like enough. But it's strange how the things you tolerate for years can turn into the things that finally break you. I've been with my boyfriend Andrew for 18 years. Long enough that our routines were practically stitched into the walls. Long enough to raise 3 children, Emily now 17, Josh 15, and little Owen, who just turned 9. Long enough, I thought, to be known. But if there's anything I've learned since that day, it's that you can live a whole lifetime in a house and still be treated like a guest no one bothers to acknowledge. I wasn't the charismatic parent. That was always Andrew. He had a natural shine, quick with jokes, always charming, always earning applause in ways I never cared to compete with. The kids adored him. Emily mirrored him. Josh worshipped him, and even Owen, sweet, gentle Owen, looked for his approval before anyone else's. Me, I was the background figure. The one who packed lunches, cleaned spills, paid bills, fixed broken drawer rails, kept laundry folded and lives running. The dependable engine humming behind the curtain. For years, I convinced myself that was enough. But cracks have a way of widening quietly. Emily used to sprint to the door when I got home from work. Now I get a nod if she looks up from her phone at all. Josh only speaks to me in the currency of allowance. And Andrew, well, his warmth had faded into a familiar refrain of, "I'm tired, I'm busy," or "Helena, please don't make this a big deal." I told myself it was phases, stress, teenagers, life. I was wrong. This year, Mother's Day wasn't like the others. There were no homemade cards, no little burnt breakfast in bed experiments from the kids. I wasn't expecting much. I'd gotten used to small gestures growing smaller each year. But what I walked into that morning was something I hadn't prepared for. When I entered the kitchen, all 3 kids and Andrew were seated around the table, grinning, like they were about to spring some elaborate prank. Emily already had her phone out recording. Josh shoved a box toward me, stifling a laugh. "Got you something," he said. I remember the box. Plain white, weightless. I remember thinking it was too light to be anything meaningful. Inside was a mug. White ceramic, bold letters. "World's biggest disappointment." For a full second, no one breathed. I didn't either. Then, they erupted. Not teasing laughter, not playful humor. Real sharp laughter, like they'd all rehearsed it. Emily zoomed the phone in on my face, and Josh slapped the table in hysterics. Andrew nearly spat coffee through his nose. Owen giggled, but only because everyone else did. His eyes flicked to mine, confused. I held the mug. I waited for someone to say it was a joke gone too far. I waited for Andrew to put a hand on my shoulder and say, "Too much, guys, cut it out." But no one did. I smiled, the automatic kind you learn after years of swallowing hurt. "Thank you," I managed. Then I turned away and started cleaning their breakfast dishes mug, still burning in my hands like a brand. It wasn't the mug, it was the laughter. The casual cruelty, the way they shared a joke I had never been invited into, like my pain was normal, expected, appropriate. All day I moved through the house quietly. Ice cream with Owen mowing the lawn, folding laundry, straightening shelves, keeping my hands busy because my heart wasn't. It was loud inside my chest, a ringing silence that wouldn't fade. And that night, when the lights went out and the house settled into sleep, I sat on the couch and stared at the mug on the coffee table. I imagined Andrew ordering it online, showing it to Emily and Josh, planning the moment, laughing as they wrapped it. I imagined them testing the joke out loud, practicing their reactions. The pain was quiet, but it was deep, too deep to ignore this time. Around 1 a.m., I packed a small bag. Just a few shirts, some cash, my work gloves, and a crumpled drawing Owen made for me when he was 5, 2 stick figures under a crooked sun. I didn't slam the door, I didn't leave a note. I just left. 2 weeks passed before Andrew made his dramatic Facebook plea. "Please, if anyone knows where Helena is, tell her we just want her home." There was a picture of me at Owen's last school play, smiling under harsh stage lights. The comments were full of prayers, sympathy, concern. None of them knew about the mug. None of them knew what that morning felt like. None of them knew that this wasn't the first cut, just the final one. Because truth is, this wasn't about a single cruel joke. It was about years of quiet erosion. Little dismissals, backhanded compliments, Moments where I felt myself fading from the life I helped build. A family that forgot I wasn't just the woman who folded towels and paid bills. I was a person. Mother's Day didn't break me. It revealed what had already broken. And what came after, that was the part they never expected. When I left that night, I had no plan beyond motion. I drove until the familiar streetlights gave way to emptier roads, until the ache in my chest dulled into something bearable. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't replay the laughter in my head. I simply drove as if distance alone could loosen the years knotted around my ribs. I ended up at a cheap, extended stay motel 2 towns over. $49 a night, faded carpet, a flickering hallway light, and the persistent smell of mildew. It wasn't much, but it was quiet. Quiet felt like a stranger I wasn't sure how to greet. For the first 2 weeks, I hardly left the room. I kept my phone completely off, not just silenced. I couldn't bring myself to see the notifications I knew were piling up. Messages from Andrew alternating between irritation and performance. From Emily parroting his frustration. From Josh probably asking where the charger was. Only one voice haunted me, Owen. Would he think I abandoned him? Would he think he'd done something wrong? On day 10, curiosity tore through me. I powered on my phone. Dozens of texts from Andrew lit up the screen, each one worse than the last. Where are you? This isn't funny, Helena. The kids are asking questions. Seriously, grow up. Okay, I'm worried. Please come home. Owen hasn't been eating. Emily thinks you're punishing us. If anyone has seen Helena Whitmore, please tell her we just want her home. It was paired with a picture of me smiling as Owen stood on stage in a paper sun costume. A perfect image for public sympathy. I turned the phone off again. I didn't reply because I didn't trust the sudden concern. They didn't miss me. They missed ease. Convenience. The invisible labor they believed would always be there. And I needed time to figure out whether I wanted to be found or forgotten. On the motel bed with its lumpy mattress and thin sheets, I began writing. Not a diary, more like an autopsy. Every slight, every joke disguised as affection. Every time Andrew dismissed me at parent-teacher conferences. Every moment Emily's eyes rolled when I spoke. Every time Josh expected without asking. Every memory of Owen shrinking under his father's words. Pages and pages of small wounds that together formed something fatal. I realized for the first time that I had been dissolving long before the mug ever appeared. By week 3, my money was thinning. I took under-the-table construction work at a site in a neighboring town. Nothing glamorous, but cash paid at the end of every shift, no questions asked. The men were rough around the edges, but kind enough. They called me Red, even though my hair is auburn and fading, but it felt easier to let the nickname slide. I didn't want to be Helena yet. Sometimes during lunch breaks, sitting on overturned paint buckets, the men talked about their ex-wives, ex-girlfriends, old heartbreaks. They weren't saints, not even close, but their stories were honest. Messy, human, no recordings, no public performance. I envied that rawness. One night, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, I found a crumpled, water-stained drawing in the pocket of my coat. 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. A label written in shaky 5-year-old handwriting, Mom plus me. I broke. Not loudly or dramatically, just quietly, shoulders shaking, breath, unsteady tears falling into a pillow no one would ever know I cried into. Because no matter how badly Andrew and the older kids treated me, Owen never looked at me like I was a disappointment. He looked at me like I was enough. It was guilt that hurt the most. Not guilt for leaving them, but guilt for leaving him. The next morning, I made a choice. Survival wasn't enough. I had to rebuild properly, slowly, intentionally. I found a studio apartment in a small town called Maple Hollow, the kind of place where the grocery clerk knows everyone's dog by name and strangers wave across the street without thinking twice. Beige carpet, questionable plumbing, a closet-sized kitchen. But it was mine, my first home alone since I was 24. I found work as a maintenance supervisor at a small senior living complex. Less pay than the factory, but the peace was worth the difference. And oddly, the residents welcomed me like I'd been there for years. Mr. Kepler, a retired mechanic with a limp, called me kid, even though he was barely a decade older. Miss Lorraine, who sometimes forgot where she lived, often mistook me for her daughter and handed me peppermints. They appreciated things Andrew never saw. In Maple Hollow, mornings became mine. I woke before sunrise, brewed coffee, slowly walked to the diner on Main Street, and sat at the counter while Brian the cook, with a beard like a bramble bush, served unsolicited wisdom along with eggs. "You look like a woman trying to remember who she is," he'd say, sliding me a plate. And maybe I was. I bought an old 2007 Ford Ranger from a guy whose only condition was treat her kind. The AC didn't work, and one side mirror was duct taped on. But fixing it became a weekend ritual. Tools in hand, a podcast playing low, the sun warming my shoulders. It felt like rediscovering a version of myself I hadn't met in years. One Saturday, wandering between a florist and a nail salon, I found a tiny bookstore with handwritten quotes taped to the window. I walked in and left an hour later with a paperback titled The Art of Not Being Invisible. Cheesy, yes, but one line cut deep. If you are always the one making things work, people forget you are the reason everything works. That sentence stayed with me. By month 3, I felt something unfamiliar strength. I started recording simple DIY tutorials on my phone, how to fix cabinet hinges, how to patch drywall, how to rewire a lamp safely. I posted them on a small YouTube channel I named HomeSense by Helena, half as a joke. But people watched, then commented, then subscribed. Emails trickled in questions, grateful notes, requests for more tutorials. Sponsors followed, small ones at first, then bigger. My viewership climbed steadily. I wasn't famous. I wasn't wealthy. But for the first time, something belonged entirely to me. I was building a life no one could take credit for. A life no one could laugh at. Then, on a Friday night during trivia at the local bar, someone walked in whom I never expected to see: Derek Andrews' cousin. He froze when he saw me, then walked over slowly. "Helena Holy, people thought you were dead." I sipped my beer. Not dead, just gone. He sat next to me, studying my face. "You look different, happier." I didn't respond. He sighed. "Andrew told everyone you snapped over some mug." Of course he did. I said nothing, but Derek continued. "For what it's worth, I always thought they treated you badly, especially Emily." That surprised me. Then he added something that stayed with me. "Andrew never changed the locks. He keeps saying you'll come back eventually, like you're on some dramatic vacation." That was the night I realized the truth. They didn't understand I was gone. Not taking a break, not throwing a tantrum. Gone. And it was time to build a life they couldn't rewrite. A life that couldn't be taken from me. A life only I could claim. For a long time, I thought disappearing was the hardest part. Turns out watching what people say when they think you're gone is much harder. I created the burner account on a quiet Sunday morning. A blank profile picture, a name no one would connect to me, no posts, no friends, except a handful of distant acquaintances, the kind who accepted all requests without thinking. Within minutes, I had access to the lives I'd stepped out of. Andrew's Facebook page was still public. He posted the usual curated reality brunch photos, gym selfies, the kids smiling at pumpkin patches, captions sprinkled with hashtag family first and hashtag strong dad energy. The tone was familiar performative warmth, engineered for likes. What caught my breath wasn't what he showed, it was what he didn't. Weeks of posts and not one photo of Owen, not a single mention. Emily and Josh were everywhere. Emily posing in front of a college's brick archway. Josh unwrapping a brand new Apple Watch with the caption, "Proud of my big man, he deserves the world." But Owen, absent as if he had slipped into the background the same way I once had. It wasn't accidental, it was a message. A subtle rewrite of the family portrait this time, erasing the child who still tried to love the mother they wanted forgotten. The more I watched, the more that familiar ache pressed against my ribs. But the real punch came when I remembered a detail Andrew had fully forgotten. Our shared Dropbox. He never changed the password. I hovered over the login button for a long time, knowing whatever waited inside might hurt, but needing the truth more than protection. When the files loaded, my throat tightened. A new folder, college apps, EM. Emily's initial. Inside were essays, transcripts, scanned letters. I opened the personal statement first. The essay began with a dramatic quote from Maya Angelou, a line about courage and rising. But the next paragraph, that one tore through me cleanly. Growing up, my mother was physically present but emotionally absent. She lived in our home like a shadow, silent, grim, disappointed. My father taught me how to be strong, how to laugh, how to rise above people who can't see your worth. I read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't sting because they were inaccurate. They stung because Emily believed them, because Andrew had let her believe them, because it was easier to paint me as a ghost than acknowledge the ways they'd slowly pushed me into the walls. It wasn't teenage rebellion, it wasn't angst. It was a daughter rewriting her childhood to fit the narrative that made her shine brightest. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling of my little apartment. Beige paint, tiny cracks, faint shadows from the afternoon sun, small details that felt more honest than anything in that Dropbox folder. I needed someone who hadn't chosen a side, someone who hadn't rewritten me in their mind. I needed Owen. It took me 3 days to gather the courage. I wrote him a letter, short, careful, written in my own handwriting so he'd know it was real. Hey, buddy, I'm safe. I miss you. I didn't leave because of you. Sometimes adults need to make hard choices to protect themselves. If you want to talk, ask Dad if you can go to the library this Saturday at 3 p.m. You don't have to come, but I'll be waiting. I mailed it through the local library's Dropbox to avoid the return address. Then I waited and paced and tried to convince myself not to get my hopes up. Saturday came. I arrived 20 minutes early. The children's reading area smelled like old paper and carpet cleaner. A mural of cartoon forest animals smiled down at me with 2 bright colors. I sat in the corner with a stack of Garfield books, trying not to stare at the clock. 2:50, 2:55, 2:59. By 3, having hope hollowed out my chest. By 3:02, I was already telling myself he wouldn't come. Then Mom. The voice was small and sure, but unmistakable. I turned. There he was, taller, thinner, hunching like someone had weighed his little shoulders down with something he couldn't name, his hoodie sleeves half covering his hands, his eyes glossy. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. He didn't run to me. He just stood there trembling. Then with a shaky breath, "You're really okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I am." Only then did he move. He rushed into me with a force that nearly knocked us both over, arms tight around my waist, face buried in my chest. I held him like he was 5 again, the same way I held him after every scraped knee, every nightmare, every disappointment. We sat across from each other at a tiny reading table. He dropped his backpack with a thud. For a moment, we just looked at each other, unsure where to begin. Finally, he whispered, "Emily said you left because you didn't want to be our mom anymore." My heart clenched. "That's not true," I said softly. "Not even close." He swallowed. "She said you were going to send lawyers and take money from Dad." I blinked. Did Dad say that? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He just looked tired, tired in a way no 9-year-old should ever look. I reached into my coat and pulled out the drawing, the 2 stick figures holding hands. "Remember this." His face crumpled. He lunged across the table, arms thrown around me, sobbing into my neck. I held him through it, rubbing slow circles on his back. When he finally pulled away, he sniffled. "Dad's always mad now," he said. "About what?" "Everything. The dishes, the internet. His car battery died last week, and he said if you hadn't left, you'd fix it." He paused. "He blames you for everything." The irony wasn't lost on me. Owen stayed for nearly an hour chattering about math class, his new science project, how Josh got in trouble for cheating on a quiz, but Andrew smoothed it over. He told me Emily hardly came out of her room anymore, told me she had a boyfriend who called me her ghost mom. But the moment that gutted me was when he grabbed his backpack, turned, and said, "I know you didn't leave me." That sentence, simple, raw, honest, healed something in me I didn't even know was bleeding. After walking him halfway home, I watched from 3 streets away as he disappeared behind the old maple tree in their yard. My hands shook the whole walk back to my truck. That night, I sat at my desk in Maple Hollow and opened a notebook. I wrote 3 words: protect what's mine. Then I made 2 calls. First to Carl, the conspiracy-loving financial genius from my construction days, the man who kept gold bars buried in his yard and didn't trust banks but understood asset protection better than any accountant I'd ever met. "I need a trust," I told him. Anonymous, bulletproof. He didn't even hesitate. "You disappearing or divorcing, bit of both." Second, I called Dave, an old co-worker whose cousin was a lawyer, specializing in quiet asset separation, the kind that leaves no trail until you want one. Her name was Jill. She was small, soft-spoken, precise, a scalpel wrapped in silk. "I don't want revenge," I told her. "I want protection." She nodded. "Smart. You're not looking for war. You're building a fortress." For weeks, I documented everything: bank statements, screenshots, receipts, Emily's essay, Andrew's posts, the mug. I wasn't planning an attack. I was establishing truth. Because when the day came to walk back into their world, I wanted to do it on my terms. Not as the ghost they dismissed, not as the disappointment they mocked, but as the woman they could no longer erase. Josh's 16th birthday landed on a Saturday in late October, the kind of day where the air is crisp enough to warn you winter is coming, but the sun still pretends everything is fine. Maple Hollow was quiet that morning. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Nothing hinted at the storm I was walking into. I'd seen the party announcement on Andrew's sister's Facebook page, public, wide open for anyone to view. Big white tent in the backyard, string lights, a rented DJ, half the neighborhood invited. A spectacle, of course. Andrew loved spectacle. I wasn't going to ruin the party. I wasn't going to scream or demand attention. I just wanted 5 minutes. 5 minutes to remind them I was not dead, not defeated, not the ghost everyone had been talking about. I parked 4 houses down from the home I had once spent nearly 2 decades caring for. Not in front, not in the driveway. Distance is a kind of armor, too. For a long moment, I sat in the truck, hands gripping the wheel, breath steady, heart unnervingly calm. Maple Hollow had given me strength I didn't recognize at first. But now, staring at the house where they'd laughed at me, erased me, rewritten me, I felt it rising from my spine like a steel rod. I stepped out. No dramatic outfit. Just jeans, a soft flannel boots, still dusty from the senior complex's walkway. My hair was loosely tied back silver strands, catching light in a way they never used to, because I never used to let light touch me. The gate wasn't locked. It never had been. Music boomed faintly in the background. Pop beats, teenagers' chatter, the clink of drink dispensers. The backyard looked like a Pinterest board fairy lights draped over the fence, a folding table overflowing with snacks, a photo backdrop with metallic streamers that shimmered in the autumn wind. Andrew stood near the grill talking to a group of parents. Emily lounged near the fire pit, her eyeliner-wearing boyfriend draped behind her. Josh hovered near the gift table, hunched self-consciously over his stack of new gadgets. None of them saw me at first. Then the song changed. The volume dipped. Voices softened. Heads turned. And then Emily's eyes locked onto mine. Her mouth fell open. No freaking way she breathed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Conversations froze. A fork clattered onto a plate. Someone whispered, "Is that?" A hush rippled through the yard, swallowing the music whole. I stepped through the side gate, not sneaking, not charging, just walking. Calm. Steady. Andrew's wine glass paused mid-sip, his face drained of color. "Helena," he said, voice taut, "what are you doing here?" It sounded rehearsed, practiced, like he'd been preparing for this moment, but not the version he was getting. I didn't bother with him. I turned to Josh instead. "Happy birthday." His grip tightened around a new pair of wireless headphones, high-end expensive. He looked frozen, caught between embarrassment and disbelief. Thanks," he muttered. I reached into my coat and handed him a small, neatly wrapped box. Nothing expensive, just something personal, a vintage vinyl of The Wall. The same album he used to love staring at when he was 9. A reminder of a version of us that once existed. His eyes flicked to it, to me, to the guests. He didn't smile, but he didn't push it away either. That was enough. Andrew stepped closer, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "You can't just show up like this," he hissed. "This is inappropriate." I met his eyes calmly. I raised him for 15 years, cleaned his sheets, packed his lunches, drove him to every practice in the rain. I think I've earned 5 minutes on his birthday. Anger flickered across his face, anger, not guilt. "This isn't about you," he snapped. "You left us." I shook my head slowly. "No, Andrew. I left you. Stop twisting it." Around us, parents stood awkwardly. Teenagers pretended not to listen while listening intently. Emily stared down at her phone, fingers shaking. Her boyfriend looked like he wanted to vanish. Then suddenly a blur of small sneakers and soft brown curls. Owen. He ran across the yard with a force that nearly knocked me backward and flung himself into my arms. "Mom," he cried. I felt every muscle in Andrew's body go rigid. I knelt, hugging Owen tightly. "Hi, sweetheart." He clung to me like he was afraid I might disappear again. "Get back here," Andrew barked, voice sharp. "Owen now." Owen didn't let go. He turned his head slightly, voice trembling but loud. "You lied." The entire yard fell silent. Andrew blinked. "Excuse me." "You lied," Owen repeated louder this time. "You said Mom didn't want us anymore. You said she left because we weren't good enough. But she wrote me. She met me at the library. You didn't even ask if I wanted to see her." Gasps, whispers. A guest actually dropped a plate. Emily's face flushed red. Josh looked away, jaw tight. Andrew opened his mouth, but no words came. I rose slowly, Owen still gripping my hand. You want the truth, Andrew? I said, my voice steady in a way that made him step back. You want everyone here to know what really happened. No one moved. The mug was just the final insult, I said. The real betrayal was death by 1,000 dismissals. You erased me from our world one day at a time, and you taught the kids to do the same. Andrew's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. And while you played the abandoned victim online, I continued. I was building something. He scoffed. What? A pity shack in the woods. I smiled faintly. No, a company. I pulled a simple white business card from my pocket and handed it to Josh. HomeSense Media founder and editor-in-chief, Helena Whitmore. Josh's eyes widened. You're the one behind that channel, the one with 100,000 subscribers. I nodded. Andrew swallowed hard. Emily looked stunned, really stunned the way someone does when a narrative they've built starts to crumble. Then I turned to her. I read your college essay. Her cheeks flushed instantly. She glanced at Andrew for rescue. None came. You said I was emotionally absent, I said softly, that I lived in the house like a shadow. And maybe that's what it felt like to you. But ask yourself why. She didn't respond. But she didn't look away. I faced Andrew again. I'm not asking for custody. I'm not asking for money. I've already filed for visitation. My lawyer says the judge will love the documentation I have, including the mug. A ripple went through the crowd. I took Owen's hand. This is the last time I set foot in this yard, I said, but Owen is welcome at mine any time. I turned toward the gate, then paused, looking back one final time. And if anyone wants to know the whole story, I added calmly, just look up my name next week. I'm publishing everything. Names changed, of course, but the truth won't be. I walked out before anyone could speak. I didn't look back. Not when Owen shouted, Mom, can I come next weekend? Not when Emily whispered my name in disbelief. Not when Andrew finally found words that cracked and broke in his throat. I drove back to Maple Hollow with the windows down, the cold wind in my hair, and a steadiness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. That night, I opened my laptop and clicked publish on the long-form article I'd been refining for months. World's biggest disappointment, how I walked away and built a life they can't touch. Within 48 hours, it exploded. Tens of thousands of reads, emails from women around the world, comments from therapists, divorce coaches, strangers who saw themselves in my story. But the message that mattered most arrived 3 days later. Mom, I read your post. I'm sorry. Can we talk, Emily? It wasn't a full apology. Not yet. But it was the first crack in the wall. And finally, for the first time in 18 years, I realized something. They hadn't broken me. They'd revealed me. And I would never be invisible again. When a story goes viral, people assume your life changes overnight. Mine didn't nod at first. The morning after my article hit Medium's front page, I still walked into the senior living complex at 7 a.m. Mr. Kepler still handed me his daily list of things the universe broke overnight. Miss Lorraine still gave me peppermints. Brian at the diner still slid me my usual plate of eggs with a grunt that passed for affection. The world outside Maple Hollow buzzed with my words. Inside Maple Hollow, life continued at its slow, steady pace. But in the house I'd left behind, the ground shifted. I didn't hear it from Andrew. Of course not. I heard it from Emily. Her message came late at night. Mom, I don't know where to start. Can we talk just us? I stared at those words for a long time. I had imagined apologies before. Apologies wrapped in defensiveness. Apologies coached by Andrew. Apologies sharpened by teenage anger. But this one felt quiet, like a hand extended from a dark room. We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between Maple Hollow and the town I'd left. I arrived early, she arrived late. When she walked in, my breath caught. My daughter looked exhausted. Not the glamorous exhaustion she wore like makeup at 17. This was deeper. Her eyes were swollen, her shoulders slumped. She sat down across from me and didn't look at her phone once. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, Dad's mad. I nodded slowly. I'm not surprised. He says you lied in the article. I told the truth. She swallowed hard. I know. Her voice trembled. I read it twice. And then I read my essay again, and I didn't realize how badly I made you look. I thought I was just telling my story. You were, I said gently. But stories have blind spots, especially when the people we love teach us which parts to ignore. Her eyes filled, but she blinked them clear. I didn't know Dad said those things about you. I didn't know he told Owen you left because of us. I didn't know half the things he told us weren't even true. A long breath escaped her, shaky and thin. I'm really sorry, Mom. Hearing those words, real unforced, felt like finally exhaling after months underwater. We talked for nearly an hour. About her essay, about Andrew's temper since I left, about how the house had stopped feeling warm, about how Josh had become defensive, confused, pulled between loyalty and discomfort, about how Owen cried the night the article went viral because he thought Andrew would punish him for seeing me. Anger flared in my chest, sharp and cold, but the same practiced calm I had learned in Maple Hollow smoothed it out. Your brother will be safe, I promised softly. I'm already making sure of that. Before we parted, Emily leaned in and hugged me, awkward, stiff at first, then genuine. A hug that felt like a bridge rebuilt, plank by plank. Can we start over? She whispered. I nodded. We already have. 2 days later, Josh messaged me. Not a heartfelt apology, he wasn't ready for that. Just a picture of the vinyl I'd given him. I listened to it, he wrote. It's cool. It was a beginning. But the real shift came through Owen. He came to stay with me the first weekend after the visitation paperwork cleared. I cleaned the apartment twice, stocked the fridge with his favorite snacks, bought a secondhand telescope from a pawn shop because he loves space. When he walked inside, he didn't explore or wander. He walked straight to me, hugged me hard, and said quietly, "It's calmer here." We spent the weekend fixing a loose cabinet hinge, watching movies, drawing, talking about constellations. He slept soundly. He ate well. He laughed a real laugh I hadn't heard since he was much younger. When I drove him back on Sunday night, he hesitated at the door. Can I come next weekend too? He asked. Of course. And the weekend after. As long as you want, sweetheart. He smiled, small, shy, hopeful, and disappeared inside. From the truck, I could hear Andrew's voice raised in the distance, a familiar tone, sharp, agitated, frustrated. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible for soothing it. That belonged to him now. In the following weeks, the consequences rippled outward. Andrew's reputation, the one he'd cultivated online with curated images and carefully crafted captions, began to crack. Other parents had been at the party. They had heard Owen. They had seen the way Andrew froze, the way he stuttered, the way he didn't deny anything. People talk, they always do. And suddenly, the man who had always been the charming one began receiving less validation than he was used to. Invitations dwindled. The PTA stopped asking him to MC fundraisers. Emily's teachers, who read her essay with new context, began asking quiet, uncomfortable questions. Andrew didn't implode. He didn't fall apart. But he unraveled slowly, invisibly, like a sweater catching on the edge of a nail. I didn't celebrate it. It wasn't triumph. It was truth. And truth has a way of rearranging everything it touches. One evening, as winter settled over Maple Hollow, I sat at my tiny desk editing a video about repairing a squeaky door hinge when an email notification pinged. The subject line made me freeze. From Andrew Whitmore. Subject, we need to talk. I clicked it. Helena. I don't know where we went wrong. I don't think you're telling the whole story, but the kids want to see you, and I want them to be okay. Maybe we should figure something out. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a man finally facing the limits of his own version of events. I read it twice, then closed the laptop quietly. Some doors don't need slamming. Some simply close. My life didn't transform overnight, but it opened. HomeSense grew faster than I expected. Sponsors, interviews, a request from a publisher asking if I'd consider a book proposal. I wasn't sure yet, but the idea didn't frighten me. Emily called once a week. Josh sometimes joined. Owen visited regularly and drew pictures of our house, which soon included 2 stick figures again, me and him under a new sun he'd drawn carefully. And through it all, the thing I kept realizing was simple. I hadn't set out to destroy anything. I hadn't wanted revenge. I'd wanted air, breath, identity. What fell apart afterward wasn't my doing. It was the truth catching up to a story that had never been real. One night, as snow began to fall on Maple Hollow, Owen curled up beside me on the couch, pencil in hand, drawing quietly. Mom, he asked softly. Yes, sweetie. Are you happy now? I looked around my little apartment. The thrifted lamp, the peeling windowsill paint, the soft hum of the heater, the quiet, the calm, the life I built with my own hands. Yes, I said, I am. He smiled small and relieved. Good, he whispered, because I like you better this way. I pulled him close, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, I believed him. I believed in me.